Hello. I think I'm right on time today, which is good. I like being on time. Uh, so we're on our second portrait drawing session. Last Friday was the first. So if you missed that, it's worth watching as well. So after this is over, you might like to go back to the first one. Even though I'll do a very short recap of some of the things we were doing on the first one, I think you will still find that live stream extremely handy for upping your portrait drawing skills, unless you happen to be better than me. Okay. You might still pick up some tips, you know? We're not above picking up tips from other artists, we artists. So we've a terrific sitter today. Oh, she's such a good sitter. She's sat for so many painters, and she's sadly passed away in 1964. I think she passed away. But my goodness, she had some career as a sitter, as well as being a very famous poet. That is uh, Edith Sitwell. And she did sit well. And I have provided references for you. This is not Edith here. I just wanted to have something in front of me. I'll put last week's piece in front of us. This is what we were drawing last week, and this is from a painting, so this is very derivative, but we're just doing this for practice because I don't have a sitter in the studio with me, right? And it's a handy form of practicing doing portraits that you can do too. And I have last week's pieces out because we're going to look at the piece we're doing today. We're going to do a piece on Edith Sitwell, and I have the references materials for you again. And we'll look at the differences between faces as well, because that's very important in portraits. What is the difference between one face and another in features and so on? And it's interesting seeing different people all lined up together helps you with your portraiture, you see. So we're working in monotone this week, and you'll need to set up your pencils and your materials and your reference materials if you want to draw along. So if you want to, you might just want to watch the video. I don't know. You can do that as well, and you might enjoy just doing that. But if you want to draw this week, we used a fairly soft pencil last week, exclusively just a 4B. This time we're adding a harder pencil, a 2B, or a HB would do if you had a HB. We've got what we Europeans call a rubber, which Americans will have a little bit of a snigger at. Um, but I'll keep calling it that because they call it an eraser, which we don't use, a term we don't use that often. But, a pencil paper, and you might also find some sort of a knife useful, because if you look at my pencils, they're very sharp and quite a long point on them, which you don't really get with pencil paper. So I also have a little, this is a very handy thing for when the top of your pencil goes slightly blunt and you want a very thin, sharp line. It's basically sandpaper. So only a little bit of sandpaper. If you had something like that, it'd be good. It's not totally necessary. And of course, paper. So a nice smooth cartridge is ideal for this. That's what I'm using, a smooth cartridge, not super heavy. Tends to be a little bit more expensive if it's super heavy. Um, so I don't have a super heavy. I have a 220 gram cartridge. But the smooth is a good idea. You don't want something with the tooth on it. It's going to be much easier for you to draw on a smooth paper. Not shiny. It's not shiny or anything, but it's a smooth cartridge. Now the materials for reference materials for our sitter, because she's not here with us, um, is the link below this video in the description. So if you click that link, it's a link to a blog. There are several links, but the link to a blog there. You will get a blog post up. It's somebody's WordPress blog, and it has a lot of pictures of Edith. And I have done this for you because you could be drawn whatever, whichever one or ones you like during this session. You might necessarily pick the ones that I pick. I also, so you're going to leave that tab open if you're drawn along with me, and then open my live stream in a different tab. So you have your reference materials there and the live stream. It's also a bit of reading about Edith Sitwell there, and I will be telling you a little story about Edith Sitwell as well while we draw, because I told a story last week, an art story last week. So I don't know that I could say it's become a tradition, but art stories are good fun. So I'm going to tell you a little story about. Um, I think it may have been Edith Sitwell's first ever sitting for a painter, and that is on the community tab. That's another way to use the reference material I'm talking about today. If you go over to the community tab of my channel, you will see I've posted 2 photos as reference materials. One of them, which features in my thumbnail today as well, is a portrait of the Sitwell family, which features Edith Sitwell at a young age. I think she's only about 12 in that, standing in a red dress, and her mother, her father, and her 2 brothers are in the painting as well. So that's a portrait in an interior of their very grand um, English, grand house, because they were sort of, it was an estate, they were members of society, and she actually wrote poetry that was very famous in the 20s, and I have provided a link to her reading a piece of her poetry from a piece that she did with the composer, um, William Britton. And that piece was called Facade, and it was very famous, even though it got bad reviews at the time and was, deemed a bit of a disaster. It was a very famous production in which she read her poetry. And she's reading one of her poems in the video link that I've put up. And the poem is a fantastic poem, which you might want to look up as well afterwards. But we're not here for poetry, are we? We're here for doing art. But, it's all arty stuff, so it's all relative. And it's sort of increasing our sensitivity to art, if you want to put it that way. So get your material set up. You might have the community tab open. You might have that blog open with lots of pictures of her at all different ages. The pictures that I am going to pick are one of her, uh, taken by the famous portrait photographer Cecil Beaton in 1962. And it's very derivative to do this, to draw from photographs by other artists, So I'm not going to sell these pieces or anything, or try to. It's just for our practice, Um, as though you're going into a gallery and, you know, copying a painting to understand the painting better. So we are moving to a different medium, but we're not being, completely original. But we don't have Edith Sitwell here, do we? Just to be able to set her up the way we want and everything. And Cecil Beaton is such a wonderful photographer. He has taken beautiful photos to work from, which are good resolution. The ones I want to work from, I want to work first from one of her in a wonderful plumed black hat. And that is on my community tab, that you can see that. So it's a 1962 portrait of her by Cecil Beaton. And really, you can see her at quite an advanced age there, because she died 2 years later, I think. Clay, hiya, how's it going? Oh, well, that's a very nice compliment. I appreciate it. So we're looking at Sitwell today. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she is, even though she's dead, a very famous poet. So we're going to do some drawing of her today. And some of the drawings that we're doing are going to be, rough drawings. They're not like finished works of art, but these are the kinds of skills that we've been working on, how to lay out a sort of groundwork for a portrait, how to measure things and how to shade them. That's what we were working on last week. And this was a nice portrait to do from a painting just for shade, because it was about light and shade and didn't include a lot of detail in eyes and everything. So we're going to do a more detailed approach today, right? But this detailed approach is going to start with some of the same skills. And as I say, last week's live stream goes through all this stuff, but there are a few shorts on it as well. This was from one of the shorts that I made. And I was comparing the shape of the head to an egg, which is, you hear people doing that a lot. But the reason for that, that I was doing it, is because this egg analogy takes into account the shading and the way the light is hitting the head. So looking at the first drawing, the first Cecil Beaton photo that I'm working from, the one of her in that wonderful black hat with the little netting thing on it, with her two hands up to her face that you can see on the community tab, I can see that the light is being received on the right hand side of the picture. And her head is actually very slightly tilted. But I would say to you, if you're picking a different photo to work from, if you prefer one of the photos from the blog to work from, don't pick one of the ones where the head is tilted way over this way or the other direction, because what happens when you put your central lines down, say the head is facing forwards, and you're going to start putting in eyes. And this is the way I did them. We were working in ovals. We did a cross, that the crossbar for goes halfway down the face. And this, if the head is straight on, is halfway. Or if the head is in 3/4, it's less than halfway. And the drawing I'm working from, the face is in 3/4. And going with the analogy of an egg, the line isn't exactly straight down 3/4 of the way across. It's actually curved, and I'm going to draw a curved line. This is just one way of doing it. And you see the way I'm being pretty loose about my lines. I haven't gone like trying to find the line exactly the first time. Sorry, I'm too far up. Yeah. I am loosely drawn an egg shape, and I've gone around a few times until I find the line. That's called finding the line. And it is a very handy thing to do because it keeps you loose. And I was always also talking about how not only when you place a pencil in your hand loosely, your fingers can move loosely, but when required, if you watch the movement of my arm there, the whole arm can move. So the more relaxed you are all the way up, the better you're able to move and the easier you're able to find the line. Okay, so we found the line. This whole board is actually a little bit too far up. I could have had the camera in a different position for this a bit better. Not to worry. You're used to my camera shaking and going out of focus and doing all kinds, and you still come back, so that's nice. Okay, so in my picture here, I've avoided going for one of these sidewaysy things where the head is tilted. And that is because the tendency is when you're drawing or painting somebody whose head is at a tilt, your mind keeps trying to correct it into an upright position. So I would say that if you're not super advanced at doing portraits, pick reference materials where the model's head is it's not 100% straight. And this Beaton portrait, because he wanted a little bit of movement applied in it. but it is almost completely upright. And we've made it upright or I've made it upright in mine. Now, not only is the head an egg shape, but I suggested the last time that it's a good idea to suggest neck as a pillar for the head. You've got to put the neck in as two lines to either side of your head. But actually, in this portrait, her head is forward, and her shoulders are back here somewhere with the neck foreshortened, where she's kind of at that angle if my wrist was the neck. So it's hiding the head here is hiding the neck. That is why you can't see much of her neck. You can just see a little bit of a black color there. So in this one, every painting can be different. The neck isn't there. We don't have to draw the neck at all. We just have to draw the shoulders, and the shoulder line is up higher than it would be if we were drawing her head straight on with no foreshortening. And foreshortening is, something projecting forward, and there's actually sometimes distortion as a result of that, but it's actually it means just the position that something is in. So this is why in this portrait, no neck, okay? But the position of the head I got by figuring out roughly the position of the ears. So I have that central line, which is slightly curved as well, because we are in a 3/4 view here. And I put that central line halfway down. Okay. These are all things you'd learn if you ever went to an art class, right? They'd be sort of lesson 101, but it's good going back to lesson 1 sometimes, because you can progress very fast when you do. Now, I had this funny little trick that I don't see people using much, but it's so handy. The eyes, right? I was pointing out to you last week and showing you my little friend Tony, the plasticine head model, portrait model. And I was showing you how Tony had little eye sockets, right? Like a skeleton does. Everybody has eye sockets. And the eyeballs go into those eye sockets, just like a circle, right? But I'm going to generalize about the eye sockets and make them an oval, even if we were talking about from the front. We would be still talking about working in ovals there, okay? Either side of the bridge of the nose. It's very rough at the moment. We're going to work into general now in a minute. This is just to get placement of things. So her eyes are roughly in this position. And don't worry about the fact you have bits going outside of the lines, that the eyeballs look really funny at the moment and nothing like Edith Sitwell. There's always a stage like that in drawings where the thing doesn't look like the thing you're drawing, but you have this little tool, you see, your rubber. I'll get you used to calling it a rubber yet, even if you're not a European. So you have your rubber or your eraser, whichever you're happy with calling it. And in the eye sockets, we can actually go ahead now that we know the distance outwards, roughly, of the eyes from putting in those ovals, because the ovals are kind of a rough size in relation to the whole head, which you've decided the size of already. We can go ahead and get this bridge of the nose distance, which we have already, and continue it on up into the line of the eyebrow, because that's an easy line to find. Okay, so now we've found a position of something else. Now we want to keep finding positions of other things on the face, all related to the positions we've found already and related to this head shape. I wouldn't go much smaller than this head shape, because it'll become a lot harder to draw. But you can go a bit bigger. You saw some of the heads I had that were very big, but I wouldn't go huge because you'll get distortion again. We're just trying to make things easy. And from my point of view, I'm trying to fit this into the screen for you. Okay, so we've got the position of the eyes, even though we don't have a lot of detail in the eyes yet. We don't even have the first thing that I did last week in the eyes, the eyeballs and pupils in yet. We can put them in very soon. So we want to put in Edith's position for her nose, which is if I want to get an angle, I'm going to hold up my pencil, hold my arm out completely straight, and at arm's length, there's my arm straight, hold the pencil up to the side of the nose in the original reference drawing, right? And that should give me the angle of the nose, just kind of isolated, so that I can then kind of just think about the angle of the nose and filter out everything else and then put that in. So that's how you roughly get the angle of the nose. And we can generalize about it by doing two lines. Okay. Now, and a kind of there's kind of a box shape at the bottom because the nose has to come back in, and the angle of the nose, forgetting about nostrils and all the details in it, can be done the same way with holding your arm at arm's length with the pencil out and seeing what angle runs along the bottom of the nose and coming back down and placing that angle down. So that's how you find out what angles things are, because it can be quite deceptive, these things. So sometimes you have to check. Now we can put in a nostril just roughly, okay? And everything's still very square looking. So that'll all, change a little bit in a while. Still looks a bit kind of, cartoony and everything. We'll get a bit more specific later. So then you have that little, whatever you call it, little mark in the middle of the upper lip, and we've got to find the position of the lips. And Edith has hardly any upper lip. She's very thin lips, right? So her her lips, if you actually look at the angle of them in this particular photo, it's almost straight across with a very slight curve, right? And this distance here you would get by calculating roughly the distance from here to here and then moving it down. Now, um, I mightn't be correct. I might go back and readjust things because already I have decided that the position of the chin should be slightly lower. If this is what I've decided for the mouth. So I'm going to change that. So, I haven't done a big load of work in kind of getting the edges of the face around. I've only done a bit. And we have an added complication that there are hands in this. And we're going to go the same route of generalizing about things and make the hands slightly like long candles or pyramids, which is appropriate because in a poem that I linked you up to in the community tab, um, part of the poem is about candles like scorpions. It's kind of a creepy poem. And the creepy poem is actually thought to be inspired by her ideas about her mother, because this creepy story is set in a big palace, and the big palace sounds suspiciously like the Sitwell uh, home or mansion, which you can see in the Sitwell portrait on the community tab. There are two photos over there for you, the reference photo and the other portrait of her when she was a kid in the red dress in her home. So that performance of facade, I'm putting in the eyeballs now, so we're getting more specific, and I'm going to just tear my pencil a bit again. So that poetry and music performance facade was first performed in that mansion. And that particular poem is all about this gloomy behemoth of a figure that seems to be a reference to her mother. And it's a rather kind of a frightening figure, or threatening at the very least. And the palace is quite a gloomy one. And this doesn't come as a huge shock when you know anything about Edith Sitwell's biography, because Edith Sitwell, apparently, and she has said this herself in interviews. She's a very interesting person in interviews. I'm going to get rid of some of these initial lines now because they're putting me off. So that's where our eraser or rubber comes in. She did say that she had some dreadful cruelty when she was a child living in that house. And some of the cruelty came from the fact that Edith Sitwell, you might have noticed if you've looked at any of the photos in that blog, is a very sort of long person, putting her ears halfway down. There's the halfway down line. They're just poking out from under the hat. I think ears add to the realism in the thing when you get a chance to include them. They're nice little anchors. So the cruelty was that she had this disease. I forget the name of it, but whatever the disease was, it made her limbs. Whoops, broke a point off. I'm shading using the side of the pencil now, nice and loosely, and just going back and forth. Okay, with the dark on this side of the face. Put the hat in. So the cruelty was that the father made attempts to straighten her out because the disease made her very long and could create medical problems. Some people suffering from it get kind of bendy bits and everything. But she endured being strapped into this kind of body cast thing, a little bit like the Frida Kahlo story. I think she had some sort of, I don't know whether it was innate injury or acquired or something. Something that she required a full body cast for anyway. I'm generalizing about this neck shape. No, I'm not going to go into huge detail on it. I'm interested in the face. Sorry, the camera's going to be moving around a little bit. Extraordinary shape, this thing, isn't it? It's very dramatic. So, yeah, so you can imagine for a little kid that would be rather scary and freak you out. But you could argue, well, maybe that wasn't through cruelty, maybe that was kind of, kindness. But then you learn a little bit from her biography, which she hasn't ever said isn't true or anything. So I'm thinking, okay, it's probably true. Then we're going to switch to the harder pencil for fine lines that are more going to stay exactly where I put them. Very fine point you need on this. Yeah, where the cruelty comes in, or appears to me to come in, is that when John Singer Sargent was called for doing that portrait that I've shown you on the community tab and in the thumbnail here, the father said to Sargent, reportedly, that he was disappointed with the way Sargent painted the daughter's nose in the portrait, that her nose wasn't very nice, and he wanted Sargent to straighten out the bump in her nose. Now, when I'm looking at the portrait of Edith, I'm also looking at a second portrait, and in the second portrait, which I did have on, but I don't know where I put it. Oh, yeah, it's one of the ones from the blog. Let's see. Is it on the blog? It's one of the ones from the 1962 one, which I don't know if it is on the blog. It is 3 portraits in one. There it is. It's the very first portrait by Beaton on the blog. You can see from the side that kind of bumpiness in the nose, and actually it doesn't look as prominent there as it did in other photos of her. But she does have a bump sort of here-ish on her nose. And the father was objecting to the presence of that bump, which is, obviously, he thought women should just look beautiful. He believed, apparently, that women should not have an education, that it was not an attractive thing in a woman to have an education. He must have been just a joy to be around. And he would have disapproved, I would have thought, wholeheartedly of Edith, who was a super intellectual person later and fantastic poet and everything and very, very educated and knowledgeable. Um, now I'm going into the eye area, and I'm trying to be more specific. And you can see how this could be difficult in a small area. So this is why I'm saying we're being rough today, because I could go a bit bigger here with an eye and try and get exactitude. And when you're drawing, don't be afraid to do this when you're practicing. Say, I can't do it there, and go over on the same page and try it somewhere else, because that's what practice is all about. So there's the oval you see of the eye. You don't have to shade in the whole thing if you want. There is the circular eyeball placed within it, and this is how the eyelids work around that, okay? Edith had a very set back eyelids, set back into her head, which means that they're recessed very deeply and create, in this lighting, a very dark shadow. Because that's the eye socket, isn't it, when you think about it? So in the eye socket, there's that very deep depth. Um, it's around the eyeball, isn't it? And then there's the eyelid, you see. So sometimes people draw eyes like this and then put it in, get a bit stuck when they get to this bit here, you see, because they're not thinking in terms of eye socket, then eyeball, then uh recess of the eye. Now, not everybody, to complicate matters, this is why portraiture is complicated. Not everybody has that big dip there. Some people don't have it at all. Some people just have um, a shape that's like this kind of thing, kind of hooded eyes, they call that, where the eyelid isn't even visible, you know? You only have a very slight thing going on, you know? And this bit here is going to might have a bit of shadow going on underneath, and you've always got these kinds of structures on the outside of the eyes, and you're going to have some shadow happening there. It depends on where the light is coming from, you see. And you want to be careful about if it's female having lashes and things in. Not everybody has strong lashes. And when you look at Edith Sitwell, she doesn't actually have lashes at all that I can detect. So, this is the differences between people that I'm talking about. We don't make kind of big generalizations where everybody's the same. Edith has very unusual eyes, which I don't know if it's something to do with that condition or not. People with the condition, whose name I've forgotten, tend to have rather bad eyesight. Um, I don't think she always wore glasses though, so I don't think it's to do with that. But she has this kind of slit effect of her eyes, which is rather unusual as well. And this is part of the reason she was so sought after by. So I'm doing it bigger here, but I will go back to this as well. This is part of the reason she was so sought after by artists for her unusual features, which were very striking. And it's exciting for an artist to paint somebody that's paint or draw something. It's not like anybody. Now, you don't have to hold your pencil like that when you're shading. You could go that way if you wanted to. Now, the eye doesn't make sense on its own until you start having the nose involved as well. So I'm actually just putting in a little bit of the nose to show you. Now, you can see how that bit doesn't look too unlike Edith now. It actually needs the eyebrow to go in to start looking like them. And you might be surprised to see that, and I'm working from the head that's in his triple um, portrait of her on the blog at the moment for this one. You might be quite surprised to see that the white of the eye is not white in this one. Sometimes it isn't, you see, because it depends again on the light and how far into the head that eyeball is. And her eyeballs are set quite far back in the eye sockets. So, I mean, compared to, generally speaking, if we could generalize at all. So, with the light coming from this direction, okay, um, the darkest bits are going to be the bits that are coming out away from that. And this eyeball shape, because it's a ball, that's it there basically, isn't it? The eyeball. There's where the shading is, you see. So that's why underneath the eye is like that. And it's very interesting because if we continue down, and it is easier for me to show you at this scale, I'll just finish this little bit here and put some of the darkness in here. She actually has a white feathery hat in that one, so we don't really care to go into loads of detail. I'm just putting in the darker bits to show you where there's the area light. There is the area of the light on the eyes. You can see how it's starting to look quite a lot more real now. And down here, because she is an older person in this, now she's in her 90s somewhere in this. Some of the muscles have dropped, you see, and that's very interesting to draw. So you've got this muscle kind of receiving a lot of darkness underneath, and then another one. That's actually the cheekbone area down here. So this is all happening. So some of the things that you kind of might say, well, what's all this light, dark, light, dark? If you say, well, what muscular structure has that to do with? It makes the task easier. Okay, so if I go back to this one, it's going to be less detail in this one because it's smaller. We're going to generalize about the eye and have it fairly dark. And you see how I'm more confident about positions now that I worked over here. So, things are pretty cool. She actually has, I noticed in some of the things, she has a little bit of a flap of slightly hanging. It's not muscle, it's fat tissue or something there. It might be muscle, I suppose. It's not really as visible in those particular photos. But this is why it's handy having lots of photos, you see. So in theory, she's going to get older looking as I work with those dropped muscles because there was just a structure I was building it on. So I have changed my mind about the shape of the face there and the position of the hat. So you can keep changing your mind about things as you go along. Like even the size of the eyes, I've changed my mind about it. And I think this particular drawing I have here, it's a little bit too small to get the details in. So, that's kind of my mistake. So if you started working at that scale and are having difficulties, I can almost guarantee that's why. So this kind of scale, is going to be better for you in a way. But you see, you look at all the work I've done on one page. I've been moving around the page and learning so much as I'm doing it. This is a working sketch. Um, Now, where are we now? So we were on the nose, and I might work the nose at a bigger scale as well. I'm working between two photos, and she's in different positions in both photos, which, I should kind of decide which photo I'm back to the one with the big netted thing. And what we're trying to do here, right? We're not trying to 100% copy the photo. We're trying to find out what this woman's facial structure is and to explore a portrait of her that does look like her. Hopefully, at the end, these things aren't always guaranteed. They're tricky. I know that doesn't go out that far. I mean, I even have the eye looking in a different direction here, so it's not that accurate. But I'm going to leave it because it's still like her eye. So I'm just going to have the eyes going in a different direction than they were in the original portrait. And I don't have the main lines down for the face on this bigger version. So I've just put them in roughly. And I'm going to be looser in this bit because we've kind of talked about how to do the eye. And I want you to see how it progresses just as a fluid kind of a thing, when somebody's feeling perhaps overly confident, but when somebody's feeling fairly confident. See, I don't have to really change pencils too much on the bigger one because I don't have to get fiddly with this pencil. And I don't mind it slightly blunt at the moment. But if I start going into a big lot of detail, I would sharpen it again. I'm not going to be doing huge amounts of detail. Okay, so that isn't as dark, that eye, because we know the light is coming from that way, okay? Now, another thing you can do with shading if you want is that curved thing I was doing there. You can curve your shading if you want. And actually, that's all nice practice for getting your hand moving in a nice, relaxed kind of way. And they're always wonderful. And in fact, I'm going to just do a little bit of pencil pairing here to get a point back on my 2B pencil. Yeah, so I never finished the story about the Sitwell family painting, really, because there's a story associated with that painting. That's not just about the dad asking the painter to change her nose, because he didn't like it in the portrait. He wanted her more glamorous looking, you see. Didn't like the way his own daughter looked. Um, he, Sergeant, um, refused. And it was said, you see, it's hard to know what's true and what isn't because, I haven't checked this in various places. It's an amusing story, so I'm just telling you anyway. They won't mind now. It is said that Sergeant gave the father a big bump on his nose, on the bridge of his nose, which he didn't have because he was so offended at the thought of a father calling his own daughter ugly. I don't know, you see, I don't know if that's true. One person's ugly is definitely another's beautiful. And Edith was a beautiful delight to artists. So look at this nose, although um, the angle of the nose is this, the face in this one is very slightly tilted. Look. So that's a slightly challenging one. And you can have it straight on if you want, if you find that easier. So we can be a bit, once we have the width, the eye and everything, you can be more confident about the edge of the face. And for hands, once you get the scale right, you can generalize a bit. Hands are something that, to do portraits, you tend to often have hands involved. You can do portraits without hands if you don't like them, but it does add an extra something to portraits because hands are another expressive thing that interact with the face, don't they, quite regularly? So for the size of the fingernail and therefore the finger, I'm referring to the eye. So I'm saying the fingernail is about the size of the eyeball. So that gives me about the size of the fingernail. And hands, I warn you, can look very alien. So they kind of are a bit alien. So don't panic about that if they look alien for a while, because it does take a little bit of work to get them to get past the alien stage. So here's the edge of that finger, and it's casting a shadow, you see. So that shadow is being cast right across here, down here, and has nothing to do with their facial structure. Okay. Sorry, I'm checking chat just to make sure nobody's chatting away to me there. I don't ignore it. So we have the position of the end of her nose, basically, okay? And the angle of our nostril we got earlier. Remember, we're just sort of transposing this up into a bigger drawing now, you see, to make it easier to work on. She's got very nice roundy nostrils. This stuff, right, like the wrinkles, you could leave for a while to work on, but they are part of the person's character. So we might put some of them in here at the moment because they are a help, I think, in getting the overall thing. Now, I don't have the correct distance there, I don't feel, and yet it looks like it's in the right place. So I think I've done something wrong. See the way you keep changing things? You're not stuck with anything. And this is just a little bravery thing you have to do in portraiture. That's it. Be a bit brave and not too, as they say, precious. Don't be too precious about things. And tentative and freaking out about everything. It's a drawing. You have fun with it. And you learn, you see. And if it doesn't turn out well, you go, it didn't turn out well. No big deal. Don't hate myself for it. But this is nice. I like this. And Edith was also known for huge jewelry. I presume it was costume jewelry. I don't know. I think they were stinking rich. Certainly, in her youth. I don't know if she continued to be rich or what, because I didn't look up loads of things about her. I would get into looking at more of her poems though, and I like uh William Walton a lot. I hope I didn't say William Britton earlier. I get Benjamin Britten and William Walton mixed up a little bit. I liked his music for that a lot as well. So I've gone and look at more of those. But if you're interested, they're over there on the community tab. Okay, so we have the hands kind of they're not really supporting the head, but we have them suggested because we have enough of the head in for those to happen. So you see the way I'm doing the mouth, I'm not doing this kind of this thing, little outliney things and generalizing about mouths. That's mouths don't work like that. Um, And her mouth particularly doesn't work like that because she has this fabulous, I love it, uh, thin mouth, which is really dramatic. And she's actually made it more dramatic in this particular reference one by putting a dark lipstick on it. And I find the corners of people's mouths very expressive because there's that kind of sagging as they get a bit older. Not everybody's does, but it's quite expressive that. So, parts of a person's experience of life and everything are in lines, contained in the lines there. Now, so far, we're not getting as good a likeness as that happens, you see, when you lean too hard. We're not getting as good a likeness as we were last week, but I think it's going well. I think in other ways, so it's not a flop of a session or anything. So I thought she would be easier to get a likeness of, to be honest with you, but because she has such strong features. But if I wanted to arrive at a good likeness, I would do a lot of different portraits of her, I think, and keep going, you see, and I'd get there. But that's how it works, you see. We haven't got the nose. I say I haven't got the nose quite right yet. There's something gone wrong in my measurements. That needs to be out further, basically, I reckon. And this is good that I'm doing it wrong. No, 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 I'm not just covering for myself. It is good that I'm doing it wrong because it's showing you that this is the process. It can uh, go wrong sometimes. And look at the huge recommitment I'm having to make there. Now, I would not like to be doing that in a painting, right? Because I would prefer to do all the working out or a lot of the working out now in a drawing, then get it more or less right, and then either transfer it onto a painting or um, freehand draw it. And it's going to be much easier to freehand draw something that you got right the first time, you see. So I'm having to rethink this whole thing here. Only moved it like a millimeter. That happens, you see. But instead of saying, "Oh my God, I got it wrong," you say, "Oh, this is fun. Okay, I don't have that right. I'm going to change it." So it's great. It's great that I made a mistake because I got to show you that it's not the end of the world making a mistake. So I'd prefer this to be out here because I knew there was something wrong, you see, because this distance here, there's something wrong with that distance, even though that was nearly in the right place. If I do that measuring thing and run a line down with the pencil, down the face, that, if I ran it down straight, well, it's actually in the right place. Perhaps no, that's in the right place. Where's my hand in relation to that? Hand is out here. The hand is in the wrong place, you see? So that changes. And this is why you need a rubber. As look at you can end up with quite a mess on your page, to be honest with you, in terms of rubbing out, putting things back in. But um, it's a beautiful mess. It can be a beautiful mess. The evidence of work in a drawing can actually look very exciting and lovely. Honestly, maybe I don't know if this one is going to, but it can. A well worked drawing, and sometimes the mistakes in a drawing that have been worked over and over can be exciting. They can add excitement to a drawing. Believe me, try it. Try correcting mistakes, and keep going, and you will thank me for it. You don't have to come and thank me for it, but I'll accept your thanks in my mind. You're thanking me for it already, see? So, understand the light, important. We want to know that the light is very dark here and that the bridge of her nose is very dark as well. I want to keep an eye on the time now, you see. I don't really want to hurry, but I want to have something I can say to you is finished. Now, there we are. There's our new position, okay? So we are heading out with the nose again from our new position. And we're going to have a very thin line there. And you see the way I'm using the eraser or rubber to get back down to one very thin line. And in fact, the 2B pencil is better for that. This is why this is the reason that you can swap pencils a lot. And you see the way the shading is getting a little bit more sort of definite as I go along than it was in the beginning, because I'm adding more detail. So watch what happens when this bit goes in here. There's the shadow that was basically cast by a finger. That's why you put the finger in, because the finger adds that fantastic bit of interest to it. How are we doing for time? 2:56. I have 4 minutes left. I never even got to I got to refer to her face from the side, but I didn't get to draw it, which is probably just as well, because I'd like you to, if you have not done portrait drawing before, maybe avoid doing anything from the side. We're going to go up to top of the head here. Now you see how brave and bold we're getting, because we know that this is a big shape. Oops, sorry. You didn't see any of that, did you? You didn't see me getting brave and bold at all. Now, I'm going to tell you about what we're going to do next week on our third portrait drawing. And I don't know whether you want me to keep going into a painting or what. Want to help me pick sitters or what? You see, I don't have that many subs. So I don't get that much feedback when I ask people things directly. So I tend to end up just making up my own mind on these matters. But if you want to give feedback anytime, you can do so, either on the community tab under a post or here under the video. But next week, I have an idea for next week, and it's to build on some of the skills we have already. Next week, we're going to be working with some color. So this is next Friday's live stream. And we're going to introduce color in. So far, we have been working with monochrome. So we've just worked with pencils to get light and shade, but we want to start introducing colors in. So how I propose to do that is, I would suggest, if you have them, colored pencils, or what I have is watercolor pencils, which are very light colored pencils. If you don't have those other options, you could consider bringing to that Friday live stream for another reference session, which I haven't picked the sitter for yet. We might continue with the same sitter, we might find a new sitter, I don't know. Or you could use a sitter references you like yourself, but make sure you have enough material that's good resolution. If it's something photographic, it's going to be hard for you to get an actual sitter for yourself. And you don't want to do a self-portrait because you're going to be moving around too much, so that's not going to work out too well at the moment. more than one photo, I would say, of the person, if you had photos of the person from different angles. But you saw how I managed to do it with Edith Sitwell, and you saw that those photos were very good quality to do it from. So that would be ideal. So colored pencils would work. What else would work? Let's think. Um, Even watercolor would work. Although that's headed more into painting medium, it would work over pencils. Ordinary pencil, if you were, if you only have ordinary pencils and a little watercolor set, even that would do. It's not as good as colored pencils, but some colored pencils don't have the colors you want anyway, if you just have a set of them. So, that's not necessarily ideal. Excellent would be soft pastels if you had those. Oil pastels wouldn't be too bad either. So think of some those sort of options, drawing options. Uh, or if you want, you can bring paint, but just color of some sort. Okay. So we're going to leave it at that. I would have continued to work on that because, I still had a lot of problems to solve with it, basically. But, in terms of a likeness, it doesn't really look like her at the moment. It's getting there. It's getting there, but it's not quite there. I have a lot of structural things wrong with it still, I think. But it's a starting point. And as a starting point, it's okay. And it was good practice. So during the week, when I've decided what sitter I'll find for us for next Friday's portrait live stream, I'll post it up and tell you about it. And feel free to give me feedback if you want to. Otherwise, just turn up with some media you can use for color. And if you have no color, just come with your pencils. Okay, anything will do. Even if I think pencil would be better perhaps than pen. But if you have pen, even if you have those felt pens, watercolor felt pens, they come in lots of different colors. I have a set of those. We could work in those as well if you want, or instead, whichever. Bring those if you have them. So that's it. That's Edith Sitwell. And I hope you are interested enough in her to go off and find out more, or perhaps read that poem, because while the um, while the reading of it with the music, the video that I linked to in the community tab is excellent. It's not very easy to make out all the words of the poem, and the poem is terrific. Um, Really wonderful, and you might enjoy some of the other poems as well. It's nice to find new content, to be interested in on the internet. And there is a whole channel on YouTube. You'll see from that video that YouTube have created about Edith Sitwell as a topic. So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff on that channel. So I'm going to check through those. Absolutely fascinating. Fascinating lady. Wonderful sitter. She did indeed sit well, did Dame Edith Sitwell, the poet. Okay, and thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that session. I hope you enjoyed some of the difficulties I was having with that portrait. And we'll compare it to finally, well, I think of it, compared to last week's portrait. Here's this week's portrait. And I'm an amazing artist and a Renaissance one. How nice of you to say so. And you can tell because I read it out, Rachel. Aren't you sweet? I would love to consider myself as a Renaissance woman because the range of interests I have are um, anything classical, I love. I'm terribly traditional in terms of academic artwork and things like that. However, I have influences from modern style art as well and illustration, which I like. But look at the two faces here. You see how different they are, not just in style of drawing, but different. There are different people behind them, different bone structures, um, they're giving out different vibes, aren't they? And they give out different vibes by the way they hold themselves, what they're wearing, and their facial structure, even. Okay, so I think it's very interesting when you get into portrait uh, drawing that or painting later on, that you look at the differences between people's faces. And an absolutely fantastic exercise if you wanted to keep working during the week on your portrait drawing skills would be to go to YouTube videos like a famous person like Edith Sitwell or somebody quite ordinary whose face you like, and pause the video. If it's good resolution video, pause the video at different sections and practice drawing the person in those different sections. Maybe not side views yet if you're not super confident, but have a go at them if you want. It's just we're trying to get you to where you're very comfortable with expressing a 3D shape through shade, which you don't have as much opportunity to do from a side view. But in a three-quarters view, which we did here, or another three-quarters view, which we did last week, it's very easy to do that. Or even a straight-on view. So that's another tip for where to get sitters during the week. YouTube videos, you might be able to get sitters, particularly interviews with people. You could watch an Edith Sitwell interview and pause it every so often and draw from that. It'd be very interesting. Or look for somebody else whose face you find interesting. Next week, one of the things I'll be posting, I'll hopefully, you see, I want to steer clear of uh, copyright infringements, posting things up, but I'm hoping to be able to get my hands on something that's a Wikimedia Commons thing or something that allows you to repost a share under a share like allowance of David Hockney's drawings. So if you wanted to have a look at some of David Hockney's pencil drawings, colored pencil drawings. He is a fantastic portrait painter, a contemporary portrait painter, and I find his drawings with colored pencils incredibly exciting and interesting and wonderful. And perhaps I'll talk about them a little bit next week when we're looking at those kinds of techniques. But I'm hoping that the technique would be adaptable to whatever color materials that you bring along with you. You know, to have a little look. You're not necessarily drawn along with me. I realize that people have busy lives, but you could if you wanted to, you see, or you could afterwards, and it could be interesting. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for all the sweet compliments. I really appreciate it. Vanity and all that. But being an arty type as well, you do like feedback on your work, and if it's positive feedback and somebody likes it, that's just a bonus, isn't it? Really. So I will post the link to last week's live stream underneath this live stream when I'm finished, in case, and I think that you should, if you haven't seen it, you want to watch the first portrait drawing live stream. I think you'll learn a lot from this short series, and there are at least 3 in the series, with next week's one making the third one. Okay, so that's next Friday at 2 p.m. And thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Okay, bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.